Good morning, everyone. Some of you I haven't seen to say good morning to before. Some of you I've already said good morning to, but good morning to everyone. Let's get our Bibles out. We'll say goodbye to the creche contingent. Thanks to those who are helping out there. All right. Let's turn, let's go against the grain. Let's turn to Revelation chapter 14. All right, the title of this talk is Pay Attention, if you're looking for a title. I've been thinking a little bit about attention recently. In fact, I read an article. The name of the author was Ezra Klein. I don't know anything at all about who Ezra Klein is, what he stands for. This is not any kind of endorsement of anything else that he's involved in. He just happens to be the author of this article that I read recently, and I guess it echoed some of the thoughts I'd already been having. And I guess it's useful when you've been thinking along certain lines, and then you hear those thoughts echoed by someone else who's thinking along very similar lines. And in this article, this man, Mr. Klein, he spoke about attention, and he quoted a fella by the name of Anton Barbecue, not barbecue, no, just Barbecue. K comes before Q, and Anton Barbecue wrote, so he's a philosopher at the University of California. He wrote a study called A Web of Our Own Making, The Nature of Digital Formation, which all sounds very fancy, but he wrote that attention is the act by which we confer meaning on things and by which we discover that they are meaningful, the act through which we bind facts into cares. Now, attention, I guess if you were to go for the dictionary definition of attention, you'd probably come up with something, the act of devoting all of your, concentration towards a particular topic or something like that. I probably should have looked up a nice, neat dictionary. But this here actually, this description here of attention actually picks out something that I think really matters. And that means it's the act by which we confer meaning on things and by which we discover that they are meaningful, the act through which we bind facts into cares. And I guess without getting too deep, the way that works in real life is you might be looking at some news articles on your phone, and you might scroll past 7 of them, and all of a sudden one of them is one that you might click on. That's because you've conferred value, you've conferred care into that particular item. So it's different to all the others. All of the others were there, and you had, like I said, so you've scrolled past 7 other news items, say. You didn't give them your attention. You didn't pay them any attention. You scrolled straight past them. But as soon as there was something that grabbed your attention, you gave it value. And you attributed now some care to that fact. It was just a fact amongst all of the other facts. But by virtue of choosing that item to now go in and read the rest of the story, you are now binding some care into that. And that's the difference that paying attention to something produces. It's not just a matter of, everything has the same level of value to you. We ascribe different levels of value to things by whether, in the case of multiple news items, we ascribe value to one of them by perhaps clicking on it and finding out that there's more to it. So we're giving value to something by paying attention to it. When we cede control of our attention, we cede more, or concede, as in we give away, when we give away control of our attention, we give away more than just what we are looking at now. We cede, or we give away, to some degree, control over what we will care about tomorrow. This sort of extends that thought a little bit. So when you scrolled through those 7 news items, they didn't have any significance to you. But when you pick the 8th one, that now has significance, and that's actually going to change how you're thinking about things tomorrow. So by giving it attention, it's actually brought about somewhat of a change in your perspective or your life, perhaps. So by giving attention to things, we are actually allowing them in some ways to shape our future and our life and what we care about as a result of paying attention to that thing. Now, this article is specifically related to social media and to the effects of social media on our society, and there has been hours and hours and hours and hours and yards of copy written about the effect of social media on our society. But I did want to talk today about attention and perhaps how it's most obviously exemplified, or you know, how it's most obvious in our lives is what we pay attention to, and it might be on what we choose to pay attention to. When you're driving a car, if you want to drive a car responsibly, you must pay attention to what's happening around you. That's a requirement. However, when you're sitting at home on the couch and there's nothing else going on, then you can choose what you devote your attention or pay your attention to. So perhaps things like social media are a little bit more valuable about telling us what really matters to us than perhaps the attention we might pay when we're driving a car. On that, one little point. We can really only pay attention to one thing particularly at a time. And there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bingles that have happened as a result of people who were convinced they could pay attention to 2 things at a time. And so they were typing away on their phones and then went bang, straight into the car in front of them, because they could really only pay attention to one thing at a time, which is why we have laws now. In the early days of mobile phones, we didn't have those laws about, you know, not using mobile phones while you were driving, and we've learned over time, actually, no, we need laws to govern what people are paying their attention to, because we've learned that we can only pay attention properly to one thing at a time. So that's why your attention is valuable, because it's dominating who you are at that time. What you're paying your attention to is what your focus is at any given time. And our attention might switch very quickly backwards and forwards between things. You might be cooking dinner and, you know, have the TV on in the background, and maybe you can keep hold of the plot in, you know, whatever mystery movie you are, you know. But the reality is you're actually switching your attention between the two. You're not actually paying attention to 2 things at once. You are going backwards and forwards between the two. Social media companies know this. And social media companies particularly, and like I said, social media is probably that bit where we get to choose what we pay attention to or not. They have worked out that engagement is what drives their business model. They have to keep your eyes on their screen. And the longer they can keep your eyes on their screen, looking at their content, the more they're going to get paid. So they're working out absolutely every way they can to keep you engaged. An interesting stat that I read recently. Only 17% of time, and apparently this is from Meta's research. Meta runs Facebook and Meta runs Instagram, the company that owns those 2 platforms. From their own data, only 17% of time spent on Facebook is spent viewing content posted by friends. Think about that for a second. People say they have Facebook so they can keep in contact with friends. Like, oh, I've got relatives overseas or whatever, so to keep in contact with them, I have Facebook. Meta's own data shows that people who are spending time on Facebook only spend 17% of it looking at what their friends have actually posted. The rest of it is endless scrolling through everything else that the algorithm is pushing at you. And so even Meta's own figures show us that attention that we think we're devoting is actually being hijacked. It's being pushed into another direction, and we're being dragged into paying attention to other things that we didn't. That's not why we opened Facebook. We didn't open Facebook. We thought we were just going to check in on our friends. And yet we only spend 17% of the time. I don't have Facebook, by the way, so it's the royal we. We only spend 17% of that time actually looking at what we intended to go into. Instagram. Meta owns Instagram, so they've got the same stat. Does anyone want to take a guess at how much time average users of Instagram spend looking at content posted by friends? 5%, 10%, right in the middle, 7%. 7% of the time. So when somebody opens Instagram, they might have opened it because they saw a post from a friend. They're then going to spend the other 93% of their time looking at stuff that they did not even plan to look at and didn't need to look at and weren't even intending to. That's from Meta's own studies of their data. So that tells you a little bit about this attention economy and how good these platforms are at grabbing your attention to start off with and then diverting it into a whole bunch of different directions to make sure you stay engaged, to make sure you stay looking. And we've even got words for it now. We call it doom scrolling, don't we? When people, I'm just going to check out this post from Bill, and now all of a sudden it's 4 hours later and I've been down 43 rabbit holes that I didn't intend to go anywhere near. And that's how these companies work. This article from Mr. Klein goes on to talk about competition, and he writes, competition seems to me to have made these apps better at fulfilling their corporate purpose and worse for human flourishing. Generally, competition's a good thing in a market. I mean, if you were to try and fly to Adelaide this afternoon, then not by yourself, on a plane. I'd like to see you try fly to Adelaide by yourself. But if there were 20 airlines, then chances are you'd probably get a better deal than if there's only 3 or 2. So competition is generally good for us, except for the fact in the attention economy, competition has actually driven these businesses to be much better at grabbing your attention and holding on to it. And that's not good for you. It's good for them, but it's not good for you. Generally, competition's good for us. He goes on to write, Meta's goal is to get users to spend as much time on its apps as possible, and it tunes its algorithms to show users the content that they most want to see, the court writes. So this was in an antitrust case. Someone sued Meta in the United States for being a monopoly. What Meta shows me is what Meta most wants me to see, which is whatever their prediction models believe will get me to spend as much time on their apps as possible. The algorithm serves the company's ends, not my ends. So the things that drag him in to spending extra time on Meta's platforms aren't necessarily good for him. They're good for the company. And the company's got very good, because of competition and because it needs its money, it's got very good at tuning exactly what it can serve to him through its algorithm. But there are many kinds of products in which more innovation can lead to more destruction. Do we need vapes that are more compulsively addictive? Of course not. Is it good that online gambling firms are spending so much on slick marketing to find new users? Competition in those cases is driving harmful actions. It's driving these companies to be better at ensnaring people in things that are destructive for them. And that's exactly the case with these social media platforms. About 2/3 of adults say social media has been bad for the country. This is in America. When our attention is held for hours each day by black box algorithms that feed us not what we want so much as what we find it hard to look away from, we are being, in a sense, deformed. There's another article which is related to this, which is a little bit older. There's a guy named Jonathan Haidt, or Haidt, I'm not sure how his name is spelled, H-A-I-D-T is his last name. He wrote a book in 2024 called The Anxious Generation. Now, he's a qualified psychologist, he's a social psychologist, and he wrote a book called The Anxious Generation in 2024. And he recently was involved in an interview about that book and about how it's been received in the last 2 years and how it's formed in, it's one of the texts that actually formed part of the framework for the Australian government's social media ban for under 16s as a result of this piece of work. This guy was recently in an interview and the interviewer said to him, "So you're not saying that it's any one thing. You're saying that the overall environment, social media, is so dangerous that it is difficult, maybe impossible, to use a social network like Instagram over an extended period of time and not have one or most likely multiple of these harms hit you in some way." So this psychologist, Jonathan Haidt, I might be saying his name wrong, but he has investigated the ways in which social media have been shown positively to cause certain mental health harms. And basically those harms are from all directions. Whatever it is, you name it, the mental health impacts of social media are many and varied. And so this interviewer is saying, so you're saying that then it's basically impossible to be on social media long term and not be subject to one of those harms in some way. That's what the interviewer is saying. The interviewer goes on to say, that answer somewhat surprises me because I feel like what we usually hear is, well, it's negative social comparison, right? So negative social comparison is when you look at other people's lifestyles and you go, oh, they've got so much better than I've got, I feel bad about myself. That's negative social comparison. I feel like what we usually hear is, well, it's negative social comparison, right? It seems as if my friends are living a more exciting life than I am and now I am upset. Or, the algorithm has driven me into a rabbit hole and I started out a little curious about losing weight and now I have an eating disorder. How has your understanding of the mechanisms of harms changed, if it has at all, since you wrote your book? Now, the psychologist's response is, when I started the book, I thought that the story was going to be, on one side, girls using social media get depressed in part by social comparison. That's what everyone was talking about 5 years ago, and that's definitely one of the mechanisms, but I didn't know what the story was going to be for boys when I started. And by the end of the book, and especially since the book came out, what I have realised is it's the whole environment. It's all the fishhooks dangled in front of boys. It's pornography, it's gambling, it's vaping, it's sports betting, even crypto investing is gamified in social media. So he goes on to say, I didn't know what to expect. I thought we sort of had the thing, sorted out for girls. We kind of knew how that affects girls negatively, we thought. But what we're realising is it's on every front. It's not just that there's one mechanism which girls might be affected by and one mechanism which boys might be affected by. It's the whole lot. And it can potentially affect either boys or girls. The interviewer goes on to say, there's this other dimension to it, Jonathan, which is that your book understandably focuses on the crisis with children, but adults are very much living their own version of this, right? Adults are very much living their own version of this, right? I was having coffee with some friends at the new year. 2 of them are product managers in tech, and I asked them, hey, what do you want your 2026 to be about? These are product managers in tech, remember? And they said, I need to change my relationship with my phone. And they have implemented so many different tricks. They're putting their phone in black and white, they're setting screen time limits, they're leaving it in another room an hour before they go to bed. These are the systems that people are having to devise just to try to reclaim their own time and attention are getting ever more sophisticated. And this is among the people who are building the things on the phones. So I'm curious about how you think about bringing some of these arguments out of childhood and into adulthood, because it seems to me as if this goes well beyond what is happening to kids under 18. So quick summary of that little point. Basically, the interviewer is saying, you talk a lot about kids and how it affects kids and young people. What about adults? Surely it's the same thing. Haidt says, you're absolutely right. And I think that's why we're winning. he talked in another part about how we're actually making progress, and he mentioned cases like Australia, where there are now social media bans for under 16s and so on. He said, I think that's why we're winning. That's why it's so easy to get laws to protect kids all over the world, because we all see it. We adults, we're all overwhelmed. I'm overwhelmed. I can't read a book anymore. There's too much other stuff coming in. I haven't focused on adults because I don't want to legislate for adults. I don't want to tell adults what to do, but I don't want the companies sucking my children into toxic spaces without my knowledge or permission. That's about social media. The comments then turned, or the commentary, the interview, then turned to the possible implications of AI. AI is the next big step in addiction, in attention domination, because AIs more and more are being pitched as companions. They might be called something like a chatbot, but they're actually about providing an ongoing companion in your life. And there are, as this interview goes on to unfold, there are grave fears about just how addictive these companions are becoming in people's lives. And it's obvious why. Many people, especially in the world around us today, many people are suffering isolation. Many people are scared to go out and associate with real human beings because there's so much division in the world. What happens if that guy that I run into and start talking to, what happens if I find out he's on the other side of the political divide? And all of a sudden I've lost a friend, or someone who I thought might have been a friend. So people are getting less and less involved in their communities and more isolated, and something like a constant companion who's affirmative and knows you and friendly and engages with you and starts to, over time, develop a bit of an understanding about the things that your attention is grabbed by. Those things aren't run for free. They cost an awful lot of money to run those AI companions, and the way you pay for it is with your attention. You pay attention so that these things run. And as we go on, as this interview went on, they then talked about how we're not even really sure just how big this tsunami of addiction is going to be compared to, we thought we sort of had a big deal to deal with social media. There's thoughts now that perhaps AI might be orders of magnitude more harmful to especially our young people who form destructive relationships. They don't realise they are. They don't have enough understanding to realise that what they're forming is actually a destructive relationship, which is entirely run on volts and copper and silicon, but is making someone else an awful lot of money. You might wonder why I've turned to Revelation chapter 14. There's a verse here which I'm going to take completely out of context, and I'm going to beg your forgiveness for doing that. It's just that this part of this verse really stands out to me, and I know prophecies can work on multiple different layers, so perhaps I'll play the different layer card. Right? There's a verse here in verse 14. Sorry, what did I say? Let's go to, verse 11, chapter 14, verse 11. It says, "And the smoke of their torment ascendeth up for ever and ever, and they have no rest, day nor night." Now, like I said, I'm taking that little statement out of context, but doesn't that ring some bells for you? Don't you feel like that's kind of a bit of a description of what's going on in the world around us? The smoke of their torment. These platforms chew up incredible amounts of electricity to provide to you what they provide. And whether it's the platforms that are actually running the CPUs, or whether it's the network providers who are running the transmitters that send all of this stuff to your phone or to your house or whatever, the smoke, you just see this endless industry which runs day and night and never ever stops. And people talk about, having sleeping difficulties and waking up, and the very first thing they do in their day is check their phone. What's been going on? What have I missed? What's been going on during the time that I was missing out while I was asleep? And this scripture, like I said, it's related to something entirely different when we look at the historical prophecy, what this means, but it kind of rings a bell with me. The smoke of their torment, people don't even realise just how tormented they are until they step back from what they've been involved in. And it says, and they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name. I guess I want to talk about the opposite to having our attention dominated by something. And here it talks about how there was no rest day nor night. You can jump on your screen anytime. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year, you can jump on your screen and you will not ever run out of content. You could jump on your screen right now and start scrolling, and you will still be scrolling until the Lord comes back, and you won't have run out of content. You can swap between platforms, you can swap between applications, the different things you might be subscribed to or whatever. It is endless. They have no rest day nor night. So, like I said, not necessarily directly related, but it just jumped out at me when I read this scripture a little while ago that, maybe there's another layer to this prophecy. Let's turn now to 2 Peter chapter 2. Let's get on more sure scriptural ground. When we pay attention to something, we are giving it value. That's why we say pay attention. We're actually paying attention, so we're giving something value. There is a social media economy which has the overarching driver, which is enrage to engage. Has anyone heard that one before? Enrage to engage. If you can get people stirred up about something, then they're going to stay on their screen. It's way better than covetousness. It's way better. There's way more addictive than just, having someone put something on about a nice beach house somewhere on a nice beach somewhere, I guess. That wouldn't be in the middle of town, would it? But that kind of covetousness, that used to kind of get people in. Not anymore. What drives engagement these days is people being enraged or outraged by something. If you can get them angry about something, especially if it's those people who believe in the other side of politics, then you have got people hooked. They're going to stay in that engagement, and guess what? You can feed them lots more ads and enjoy lots more money. Enrage to engage is one of the statements you'll probably run into. Let's turn now into we're in 2 Peter chapter 2. Let's start reading in verse 3. And through covetousness shall they with feigned words make merchandise of you. You're the product. If someone once said, if you can't work out what the product is, you're the product. And that's this case here. And through covetousness shall they with feigned words or fake words make merchandise of you, whose judgment now of a long time lingereth not, and their damnation slumbereth not. Now, 2 Peter chapter 2 is talking more correctly about those who have become false prophets. And I guess that's those who've known the truth and then turned their back on it. But it talks here about having people being made merchandise of. And I guess I just wanted to draw out the point that it's possible for you to unwittingly become someone else's merchandise. You are being sold because you are paying attention. You're paying and someone else is owning you. If we go on to read in verse 7, we read about how the Lord delivered just Lot, vexed with the filthy conversation of the wicked. For that righteous man dwelling among them in seeing and hearing vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. If we're up to our necks in social media, guess what? You're up to your necks in unlawful deeds. That's the way this world goes. And we see here that Lot was vexed by it because he was a just man. I just want to draw a quick contrast between Lot and Abraham in this situation. If you go back to the Old Testament and read about how they ended up in this situation, Abraham gave Lot the choice about where he would go. And Lot took him and his family and he took them to where the city was. And he went and lived in the city. And as we know, right up to his neck in it. And okay, it vexed him. He was still just enough for it to... or he still appreciated justice enough. He wasn't just enough. He still appreciated justice enough that it vexed him. But what did he do about it? If you contrast that with Abraham, where did Abraham go? Abraham chose the plain. He wasn't in amongst it all day. He wasn't being vexed by it all day, every day. He actually removed himself from that. And I think there's something in that for us. That sometimes there might be times when perhaps maybe if you've been scrolling, and whether it's a news site or whether it's a social media site or whether it's one of the many video sites or whatever, you can get to the point where your soul is vexed. But I think when we look at the story of Abraham and Lot, we've got a choice. We can get out of that environment. We can actually disengage from those things. And there are many, I know probably even many in this room, who have chosen to disengage. They have consciously chosen to disengage from social media. Yes, okay, there might be some occasional benefits to social media that you do miss out on perhaps if you've disengaged. According to my weighing up, I would rather be slightly disengaged and miss out on the occasional little bit of news from perhaps an overseas family member or something than be constantly vexed because I'm up to my neck in the wicked deeds of this world. For that righteous man dwelling among them in seeing and hearing. This is how it gets in, folks. These and these. That's how it gets in. In seeing and hearing, vexed his righteous soul from day to day with their unlawful deeds. I would encourage you, make a choice. Decide that you're going to pull back from the unlawful deeds. Decide that you don't actually need to know about all of these lawful deeds. And if you're honest with yourself and you're one of those average, say, Instagram or Facebook users where what you actually go to look at forms only a very small percentage of your contact with those platforms, then you have to wonder about whether the 93% of unlawful deeds is worth the 7% that you might have originally got on to engage with. Might be worth considering. Verse 9 is where we see the Lord's answer. The Lord knoweth how to deliver the godly out of temptation and to reserve the unjust unto the day of judgment to be punished. If we go to the Lord and say, Lord, I don't like what this is doing to me. I want to get out. The Lord will assist you. He will make a way for you. Let's turn now to Luke chapter 19. I was going to turn, if you're taking notes, I was going to turn to 1 Corinthians chapter 6 and in verses 17 to 20, it talks about how you are bought with a price. We were talking before about how you've been made merchandise of. If you're paying attention to the things of the world, you are the merchandise. Well, guess what? Someone else owns you now. You've been bought with a price. And in 1 Corinthians chapter 6, it talks about that. It says, "For you are bought with a price, therefore glorify God in your body and in your spirit, which are God's." Your body and your spirit are God's. You've been bought with a price. Yes, you might have been merchandise, but you've been bought by the good guy. And if you pay attention to him, then that will be ultimately benefiting to you. Let's look in now in Luke chapter 19. Jesus had just done a whole bunch of preaching. He'd also heartily offended a number of the scribes and Pharisees. And in verse 47 of chapter 19, it says, "And he taught daily in the temple, but the chief priests and the scribes and the chief of the people sought to destroy him." What he said was damaging their little moneymaker, where they gained their status from, where they got their social positioning from. That was all under threat because of the things Jesus was saying. And of course they weren't happy about it. Verse 48, "And they could not find what they might do, for all the people were very attentive to him." This is the only place in the New Testament that a word like attentive or attention appears. Just this one place. And when you look up what this word is in the Greek and where other places where that same word might have been used, it isn't used anywhere else. This is the only place in the New Testament that Greek word is used, and it means, guess what? Attentive. That's what it means. When you look it up, it means attentive. And so this here gives us a bit of a clue. They could not find what they might do, for all the people were very attentive to him. Who were they paying? Who did they ascribe value to? They ascribed value to Jesus Christ, and it shook the foundation of the current order to its core. The scribes and the Pharisees hated it, and in fact they hated it so much that they'd lost the attention, the value of the people, that they went on to kill Jesus Christ. It's not a new thing. When we pull away from the world and devote and pay our attention to the things of the Lord, you're turning the natural order on its head. You're changing what your natural character would want you to do. And don't be surprised if your natural character kicks up about it and says, "No, I want to do that. I like all the little dopamine hits when I'm scrolling. I want that." But are those little dopamine hits worth being up to your neck in unlawful deeds? All right, let's turn to Isaiah chapter 26. I'm going to start reading in verse 1, Isaiah 26 and verse 1. "In that day shall this song be sung in the land of Judah." And here's the song. "We have a strong city. Salvation will God appoint for walls and bulwarks." Walls and bulwarks are defences. And here the defences are salvation. And it's the defences of the city. Now, in this analogy, we could be the city. Quite often the scriptures talk about us, someone who's lost their willpower is like a man with broken down walls, right? In this analogy, if you think about you being the city, salvation is your defense. Salvation is the walls and bulwarks that the Lord has set up around you to give you a defense against the things that are going to try and take a chunk out of you. And trust me, the world is trying to take a chunk out of you, whether you feel like it is or not. And in fact, especially perhaps if you don't feel like the world is trying to take a chunk out of you, then you might seriously need to reconsider your commitment to what you pay attention to. Because I can guarantee you, the world is run by the prince of this earth. And the world is trying to take a chunk out of you spiritually. And if you're not feeling it, time to get on your knees. But our defences are salvation. It says in verse 2, "Open ye the gates, that the righteous nation which keepeth the truth may enter in." What are the gates? This thing and these things. These and these. These are the gates into the city. And this is how either your defences are broken down and you let the world in, or they are the way whereby you bring in the good stuff. They are the way whereby, even as you're sitting here now and we're reading scriptures together, you are letting in the righteous nation which keepeth the truth. And these are the things we need to be aware of. All right, your eyes and ears, just for those who are perhaps listening to this on an audio channel only. These are the gates, and they go straight into your heart. Now, just before we get to the final verse here that I'm going to read in chapter 26, maybe some practical advice about some of these things. In Galatians 5, it says, "Walk in the Spirit, and you shall not fulfill the lusts of the flesh." That's probably a pretty good start. If we're walking in the Spirit, then those little dopamine hits that we lust after, and like we've always said, lust is stuff we want. Let's not mystify it. We all have lusts, and we all have things that we want out of this world, and one of them is we want little dopamine hits all the time. That's what we've been conditioned, especially perhaps the younger generation have been conditioned to expect out of life. We want those little dopamine hits, those little we want that. But if we're not walking in the Spirit, we're going to continually fall foul of that. It's when we're walking in the Spirit that we're not going to fulfill those things. So that's number one piece of advice, for practical advice when it comes to dealing with these topics, what we're paying attention to. Walk in the Spirit, and you will make good decisions about what you pay your attention to. Perhaps for parents, and I'm aware we've got our school-age kids in here, my encouragement would be hold off as long as possible before giving your kids access to screens. We know that there is a social imperative these days for kids to have screens of some sort or another. And in fact, many schools require our children to have either laptops or iPads or whatever and so on, even from very young ages now. And so we understand there are going to be reasons to have screens around the place, but hold off as long as possible. And when they do become part of your child's life, especially when your children are young, make sure you monitor them. It's not because you're being an obsessive helicopter parent, it's because you love your kids. Make sure you monitor them. And I would extend that towards making a recommendation. And it's just a recommendation, obviously, when nobody's going to be sort of checking up on you or anything, but something that we found was really important for us with our kids growing up: no screens in bedrooms. Have screens out where screens can be monitored. Out where screens, and we know there are positive interactions that kids can have with screens. I'm not decrying the whole internet as being the work of the devil and wanting to burn it all to the ground. What I am saying is their interaction needs to be monitored for their sake, because you love them. Be conscious of your kids' online presence. You wouldn't let your child walk down a dark alley in the middle of a city at 3 a.m. on a Saturday morning. That's what the internet provides you. The internet will drag your kid down every dark alley there is if you let them do it unsupervised and unmonitored. And the things that will happen to your kids under those circumstances, in many cases, can't be undone without the Lord working. They will affect your children negatively. Because you love your kids, monitor them. Maybe reconsider, and this is maybe for us adults, maybe reconsider your social media attention. What value are you putting into social media as opposed to the things that the Lord would otherwise have you paying attention to? As we've said before, we have many resources across our fellowship where people are putting really good, really edifying things up on the internet for you to be involved in. Just in the last little while, we've been watching the Karakalinga camp streams. Sometimes you just have them on in the background. And yes, the chorus singing might be bad sometimes. But the talks and the items and the testimonies and all of that sort of stuff, and even I'll go as far as saying having the choruses just running in the background, if it gets you thinking about positive, edifying things as you're walking around, if it occasionally grabs your attention and you pay attention to it, that's a really good thing. Now, some of your phones might have just buzzed. I have just sent you a list of many websites, many YouTube channels, many podcast channels where we have thousands and thousands of hours of edifying, good content to be attentive to. Remember how the people were attentive to Jesus Christ? Let's be attentive to good things. Let's put value on attention. The things of the Lord. Let's be attentive to the things of the Lord. Have frank family discussions about the edifying use of screens. Don't be afraid to talk about the edifying use of the internet in your house. I believe it's important. Let's read verse 3 of chapter 26. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed on thee. We started off in Revelation talking about the day and night torment that this world is subjecting itself to. And here we have the Lord's answer. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace. The guy who wrote that book called The Anxious Generation, he actually freely admits he doesn't know what the answer is. Obviously conversations and talking to kids and making sure we're monitoring them, but we are driven as a natural species with natural characteristics, we are driven towards things that are ultimately going to be harmful for us in many cases. The answer is not something out of our natural characters. It's something out of the supernatural character of Jesus Christ. Thou wilt keep him in perfect peace, whose mind is stayed, rested, supported, fixed on thee, because he trusteth in thee. Quite often the Bible uses the word for. Here it actually uses the word because. You can really clearly understand what it's getting at. The reason our minds are at peace is because we trust in the Lord. And when we're trusting in the Lord, when we're paying and being attentive to the words of Jesus Christ, we'll find perfect peace because we trust in the Lord. And all the people said, yeah. All right, I'm going to hand back to Brother Lee, who's going to take us through communion.